pops in to see whether I'm teleporting myself to you. We had a chat with Geert about the stuff that you might want to hear. So after some deliberation, I thought that I'll take you a little. We'll speak about social media for public relations, but I'll take you through very quickly through how you should think about your strategy and how you should do your planning, and we'll mention things about measurement. I realize we have only 45 minutes of sorts to talk about this, and the things that I'm kind of mentioning to you today, I cover in a full semester of teaching with our students here. So if you're very curious and if you want to see more of what I've done, I'll share with you a link of the course that I teach here, which is called Digital Communication Strategies. And it has its own blog, which is dcsbu.wordpress.com. I'll write it into the chat so that you can have it in there. And on DCSBU, you'll be able to see a lot more detail into each and every section of what we're going to cover today. So what I've prepared, mind you, this is a PDF of a Prezi, so it's not as pretty as it was supposed to be, but bear with me. So what I thought I'd tell you first is what social media is really for. And there seems to be some sort of confusion because social media is so readily available that we make this assumption that because it's there, we have to use it. So many clients that I've worked with, and I see this with my students now when they embrace social media, they think that because it's there and it's readily available and because they use it, companies should use it too. So, and then there's this confusion of which platform, because there are a lot of them, which platform they should use and which one should make sense. So what I usually tell them is that social media does three good things very well. The first one is connect. I mean, it starts, if you think of the concept of social, the concept of social is about people talking to one another. So yes, it connects people, it brings people together. One of the other things social media does very well is to amplify messages. And if you want to, if you think of the Old Spice guy, the campaign with the Hello Ladies from last year was very, very successful because it's been amplified. But this amplification is not always positive. So when you think of public relations, there's always an assessment of risk that you need to do when you go online, because you're no longer creating messages that you can control. A website does that. But when you go into social media, you're kind of going into user-generated territory, which means you're exposing yourself willingly to the public. And the public might not always be happy to talk to you and might not always be happy to endorse you. On the contrary, the public might give you negative feedback more than and say bad things about you rather than positive ones. And if you want to see a good example of bad feedback, if you want, and amplification, then there's just Google United Breaks Guitars. Dave Carroll is a singer, is a Canadian singer, and United Airlines happened to break his guitar twice on 2 consecutive travels that he's done. And so he came up with this very neat little video that went viral on the internet and harmed the reputation of United Airlines more than anybody else could have. So we're there to connect, we're there to amplify, but social media is there for feedback as well. Now, when I say feedback, don't only think of Amazon, eBay, TripAdvisor, so places where we see users evaluating a service or a company or a destination. Social media has a potential for business collection insight, so business insight collection, meaning that with crowdsourcing, you can start up querying people to give you ideas for new products or new campaigns, new ideas, and if that's done correctly, it can be a wonderful, wonderful source of inspiration and quite a good key to success for campaigns. Now, so these are the three things that I say social media is for. Now, what the other things I say is that you need to think of what the platforms within social media are for. And this is one of the photos, the one that you see on the screen right now, is one of the images that I usually show. Fred Cavazza is a designer, but he, to me, has been known in the past 4 years or so for his efforts of trying to come up with visualizations of the social media landscape. So in a sense, he tried to go out there and see how many platforms are there and what they do, and try to make sense into whether they're doing it. This is his last image, and what I want to bring your attention to is the fact that you see that platforms are put together based on content. Sorry, the function that they have primarily. So you see you have publishing, then there's sharing, then there's playing, then there's networking, buying, and localization. And you have three very, very big players at the middle who drive traffic to these other platforms, but also take traffic back into. And what's even more interesting is that you see this conversation and interaction that goes across. So it's a spiral, if you want. Now, if you have a minute, and if that image is fairly clear on your screen, try to write down on your piece of paper how many of them do you recognize, and then how many of them do you actually use. So I'll be quiet for like a minute or so that you can count them and see how many you've heard of and how many you actually use.
Yeah. So try, count. Do you know 10 of them? 15, 20? And how many of them do you use? Which ones do you know? Which ones do you use? How much? Yeah? Okay, one of the students knows 20 and she uses only 5 of them.
Okay. So we're having a 20-5 ratio. Who can beat that?
Who can beat that?
I know 25 of them and I use 15 or 16.
Yeah. Another student.
Wow.
Yeah, great.
Impressive. Could we have just another one?
Yeah.
I also know 20 of them, but I only use
20-8 ratio for the third.
Okay. Let's take just one more, and then I'll tell you what we've done this.
Okay. Anyone? 18-9.
Okay. Ooh. So this image is one of the least populated when it comes to logos of platforms. Fred Cavazza, the ones that he has in previous years, has displays in its infographics anywhere between 30 to 60 platforms. So in a way, what you see is still the top of the most popular platforms up on social media. It's great that you are aware of all these platforms, but as you see, the ratios between how many we know of and how many we actively use is quite big. The point that I'm trying to make is that as you start working or as you prepare to work with social media on behalf of clients, you should be aware of all these platforms, at least be aware of what they do and what they want from you. You will probably not be able to use them all. It's not desirable to use them all, but you should be able to make an informed and a strategic proposal to your clients, being able to identify the platforms that are best fit for their needs. So social media is very much about integration, but it's also about variation. So you should know what is the best place for your client to be. So maybe Facebook isn't the best to be, or maybe Flickr is not the best to be. The way you figure this out is by thinking of what's the main function of that platform, which is what Fred Cavazza shows in that picture over there. So you should think carefully. If it's that you want to create an image and you want to control it, then maybe you want to publish things. But if you're there into sharing and finding out more, then it's probably that you're into sharing bits. If you want people to engage with your concept, but in a very playful way, then it's maybe the playing area. So it's gamification that you should keep in mind. So things like these. There are nuances between the social networks and social platforms online. And the better you understand them, the easier it is for you to come up with strategies and tactics that are appropriate for them. And this basically ensures success rather than taking you through this very steep curve. And when you create a lot of content for online, and then when you want to see results, which in many cases is related to engagement, you see it fall drastically. So it kind of protects your feelings from being hurt. So question is, where do you start? So there's so much there. How do you start with the strategy? Where do you start? So what I usually tell my students and my clients alike is that you should start from where you want to be. So you should start with objectives. Once you know what your objectives are, then you would know what sort of tactics you're going to take. And once you know your tactics, the tactics tell you what metrics to choose and also what analytics to go for. So basically, the message is that you shouldn't go for social media because you can, because it's there, or because everybody else is doing that, or because someone tells you that you should. You should consider social media when it's relevant to you and you know that is there to support your wider strategy. So you start with what you want. An objective is a formulation of where you want to be, of where you want to achieve. Now, I guess here and your other guest lecturers told you that the best objectives are SMART. So they need to be specific, they need to be measurable, they need to be attainable, they need to be timely and reachable. Yeah? So when it comes to specificity, you need to specify. Let's take an example. You want to increase positive feedback with 10% on Facebook about a particular product that you have in mind by the end of Q1 or by the end of month 1. Yeah, so this is a very good objective. It gives you something that is specific. So it tells you that it's a particular product on Facebook. Of course, we work right now in my example under the assumption that you have a Facebook page. It gave you time. So it said by the end of month 1 of your campaign or by the end of the first quarter of your campaign. And it gives you something that you can measure. So we said increase in positive feedback with 10%. So you need a before and after moment. So now that you have an objective like this, you know that you should be looking on Facebook. You know that you're going into feedback gathering. So that's a tactic. So you need to generate content, but you also need to ask questions to get ideas. And then when it comes to metrics, then you will know that you're looking, because I said positive feedback is not only the number of feedback that you receive, but you're looking into sentiment as well. So it's the nature of that feedback. We're going to go through it, but what the messages are, again, that you shouldn't use social media because you can, and you shouldn't fall into the trap of reporting when it comes to measuring effectiveness of your campaigns, everything that you can. Every platform on social media, as you're aware, comes up with its own vocabulary almost, and comes up with almost its own metrics. So, you know, all platforms give you some data. The trick, and those that are really, really good at this, will know what to choose of that data and how to combine that data that is made available to them in order to make sense. Yeah? So data without purpose, data that is not linked to your objectives and your tactics, means nothing. And it's just a waste of time and a waste of everybody else's time. So when speaking about making these campaigns work, and in a way, you being able to justify, so to account for your activities, Olivier Blanchard, which is called the Brand Builder online. So the Brand Builder, you can find him on Twitter, and he has a very, very good blog, which I do recommend you check regularly. Now, Olivier says that when you start up with a strategy, one of the first things that you need to keep in mind is what your baseline is. So as I told you, you need to have this sort of before and after moment in mind so that you can establish targets. Then what he also says is very, very important, and I really agree with this, is that you need to create activity timelines. Think that you're working on a campaign, and in most instances, you will not be working alone. So coming up with a chart, a table, whatever you can think of, where you say you have an activity plan. So we're doing this in week 1, this in week 2, that in week 3, where you have messages attached to it, actions attached to it. And to those people, you assign responsibilities. So to those actions, you assign responsibilities to people. It makes it easier for you to track progress. So that's what he's saying, create activity timelines. Then what he's also saying is that you should monitor impact on conversations. And what I'd take a bit beyond what Olivier Blanchard is saying, I would say that it doesn't make sense for you to make a lot of effort and generate content and put it up online if you're not going to monitor it, if you're not going to go see how is it living and what is it doing. So you're not only monitoring impact on conversations, but you want to see how that content that you produce lives, if it survives, if it's interesting, if it's looked at, if it's paid attention to. Obviously, you need to measure transactional precursors. So this is where all that area about measurement and everything that you can measure comes into place. So, of course, if you want to sell, your ultimate goal would be a sale. But in order for you to know, sorry, I'm losing my dress. In order for you to know, or to reach to that point when you close a sale, you produce content online that you share through Twitter, let's say. So what you need to look into is whether more people listen to you on Twitter. So more people followed you in this case. Whether people talked to you more, so whether you received a higher number of mentions during the time of your campaign. Whether you've incurred the higher number of retweets during the campaign. And then what you start doing is when you look at mentions and answers, you want to see the nature of those mentions and answers. So you want to see whether they're positive or negative. And then from there, then, you will be jumping into your website and you look into referral traffic. So you want to see if anything from what happened on Twitter, every effort that you've done there, is going to be funneled into your website, into clicks, into visits to your website. And then hopefully from those into something that is a sale. So the transactional precursors means that you need to kind of think carefully of where you've done your campaign and where your campaign leads and measure those points of growth or not growth, if you want, to see the effect of what you do. Obviously, if this is related to money, and what my example from Olivier Blanchard speaks about return of investment, then you're looking at sales revenue, and you also want to overlay data in a sense that you want to verify data. So you want various sources and various numbers to coincide for you to make sure that your numbers are right. So that's where you start. You start with a baseline. You start with an objective. Now, when I talk to my students, under the objectives should be specific, I tell them that objectives tend to have three sort of elements in them, or a combination of. And Olivier Blanchard says it really well. You either have frequency, reach, or yield. So frequency is about people, his example here is about people buying more. So, but it's basically one person buying more. So you're looking into loyalty. Reach is about more people buying more. Does it make sense? Whereas yield is about the same person buying more, but is not in the same quantity. It's that sort of growth. So what you'd basically say is that you'd want your consumer to give a little bit more to you every time they come back. Now you'd say, how does this make any sense to PR, especially when your public relations will not have to lead to sales? But if you think about it, when you want to change opinions or when you want to maintain an image, then you would want people, when you manage reputations, you do want people to speak more about you, right? That's frequency. And you want people to speak more about you in a positive way. So that's frequency. Similarly, you want more people overall to know about you. So that awareness in a way is related to reach. And when it comes to yield, you think of these conversions. So you want a person not only to speak about you, but become an advocate for you. So it does apply to public relations, although not necessarily in these strict sales terms. We're going to jump over that slide because I've taken you through it. So what I'm showing you next is the ROI, the return of investment equation, which Olivier Blanchard explains. So in order to measure financial impact of a campaign, Olivier is saying that ROI, pure ROI, is about money in, money out. Yeah, so something like, I'm an investor, I'm going to give you £10, right? That's my cost. And at the end of this, I want you to make a profit of £20 so that, you know, I kind of break even. So what he says is that you do an investment so that you take an action, right? The action is usually your campaign, your concept, what you do. And you want that action to cause a reaction, obviously, right? So the reaction in this case is what you get back from the target audience. Now that reaction you can measure in two ways. Yeah, it's first of all, you see the non-financial impact, especially if you go into social media. So you see spikes in traffic to your website, you would see a spike in, so an increase in people that tweet, an increase in people that follow you, an increase of people that share content that you produce. So that's non-financial impact. But at the end, what you want to know if there is a financial impact on what you've done. So fair enough. If you don't know this, then the question is, how do you know? If you don't know how much money in a way do you have, or if you don't know what the impact is, how do you start? And what Olivier is saying is exactly what I've told you already. You need to go at the end of it, which is your outcome, and then work your objective that way. So you work your objective the other way around. Does it make sense? So an objective, in a way, when you formulate it in English or not, is very close to an outcome. So you need to think of what is it that you really, really want to get out of that thing in order to be able then to think of elements of measurements of success. So this is where you start, in a way, at the end of the equation where you want to be, think of your targets, think of what you want to achieve, and then you establish your metrics first. So I wanted to give you some examples of how you work with objectives, with targets, and how you implement these. And I'll give you Olivier's example first. I mention his book very often because social media ROI, and then all his website is very, very good and extremely helpful. My students tell me is extremely helpful for those that are at the beginning of building strategies, because his writing is fairly simple but very straightforward. So he gives you this example of increasing sales, and then he says, well, you need to tell me how much you want to increase sales with. So with, I don't know, 20%, or with an amount of money. And then you'd think of, well, what would be the strategy? So he says, acquire net new followers by developing followers into transacting customers, and then further developing existing transacting customers into repeat loyal customers, and leveraging followers to increase reach through lateral engagement. Okay, so if you read this strategy carefully, you'd figure out that it says followers. So there are two places where we measure followers. It's either Twitter or Pinterest. But it says collateral engagement, and it says retweets, so it has to be Twitter. I know it says tactics lower, but and it's spelled out, but you read things by getting the vocabulary that way. So what you need to figure out is the valuable followers that you can convert into people that buy, and not only that you convert them into people that buy, but buy repeatedly. Does it make sense? So then your tactics in this case is to come up with special offers on Twitter. So that's a campaign if you want, and that's sales offers or rebates. But you also say answer questions from customers and prospective customers. So in a way, in order to get the loyal customers, you need to do customer service. So your tactics in this case include a combination between sales and customer service. But let's take just another example, because we're looking into customer service. Ooh, I wonder if I can make that bigger. I can't. Well, one of the examples that I had in there said increase the number of inquiries solved through social media. Now, if you're curious, have a look at KLM. KLM has a very active Twitter account, and they do use it for customer service. So let's say that you want to increase that customer service use by 10%, that you choose to do it through Twitter, because we just spoke about KLM. So in this case, the things that you'd be looking into won't be only the numbers of people that start following the account, but rather the numbers of mentions that would qualify as an inquiry. Okay, so let's say during a day you're going to get 10 tweets. Some of them would say, well done KLM, good job. Well, that's not an inquiry, so you can't count that. Some of them would say, oh, KLM, you're really bad at this, my flight was late. Again, that's not really an inquiry, that's feedback, it's negative feedback. But you might have a tweet that says, my flight was delayed, how can I rebook? Now that's an inquiry. Does it make sense? So you are looking into the number of mentions for this example that we're taking that qualifies an inquiry. And then you're going to see how many replies and how much of a conversation do you need for that query to be solved. So if you were to do this by phone, you'd kind of measure how many minutes do you need in order to solve someone's problems by phone. Because you can't count minutes on Twitter, but you can count tweets. You will be looking at the number of tweets and exchanges that you need with an account in order to solve that problem. Okay? The quicker, the smaller the amount of tweets, and the more positive the reaction at the end of solving the query it is, the better for you. Does it make sense? Yes, no? Okay. So I'll just give you another example about business intelligence, because idea generation is very, very important for public relations. Many times when you want to do media queries, or many times when you want to do campaigns to support or raise awareness for particular, I don't know, concepts, what you need to gather is ideas. And social media, as I've mentioned, is a very good space where you can gather ideas, but you need to know how to do it. So let's say our objective is to crowdsource ideas. And in this case, we're considering a LinkedIn group, right? So you could make the assumption that if this is on LinkedIn, it's rather professional, it's work related, and it could be business to business rather than business to consumer, which we spoke so far. So in this case, you need to think again about it logically. If you want ideas to be generated, then what is it really that matters to you? Well, first of all, you want to see reach. You want to see how far your plea, your query for ideas to be generated goes, right? So you're going to look at the numbers of shares, the numbers of likes that your post receives. By the way, you can receive likes on LinkedIn. I'm not making this up. LinkedIn groups have a feature these days when you can like content. Then what you want to see is how many comments do you get per post, right? We're measuring everything we can. But in effect, what you want to see is how many of those comments that you got in your post, on your post, how many of them generate an idea, right? So you might receive 50 comments, but out of them only 10 will have ideas in them. And that's still not enough. In order for you, because you wanted to crowdsource ideas and you want to crowdsource ideas that are meaningful and you can implement, what you really want to see is out of those 10 ideas, out of the 50 comments that you got, how many of them you can really implement. And if you get 2 of them and you're happy with it, then that's how you prove that you've crowdsourced ideas and you've led to, you've generated ideas. Does it make sense? So the point that I'm trying to make in a way, because we started with return of investment, is that you don't necessarily have to measure for a return of investment. Though my colleagues that work in industry more than I do say that there's a very, very high pressure on justifying every expense. But what I'm trying to tell you is that there are intermediate points where you will not have direct financial figures that you will have to justify. And in public relations, you need to be very, very good at defining those non-financial goals, non-financial outcomes, if you want, based on what your targets and objectives are. Now, social media, if you think about it, is there a support for public relations, advertising, and human resources? Is there a support for sales? I don't think we've yet seen selling happening solely through social media. I don't think we've yet seen advertising happening only through social media. Social media is there as another medium, right? So in a way, social media is just another place, slightly different from television, slightly different from radio, but it's a medium. It's different from television and it's different from the newspaper because it's not only a push mechanism and it's not only a one-to-many, but it is still a medium through which we transmit information and it has its own specificities. So get that right. Working with social media is almost similar to doing media planning. It's just that you're planning for different things. So let's try to get some ideas so far. What we said is that when you think of using social media for public relations, you really need to think carefully whether it's the good way to go, whether it's needed. Once you've decided that, then the question that you need to answer is, what is it that you really want out of it? So what is it that you want social media to do for you? This is how you establish your objectives. This is how you establish your targets. Once you've established those, then you can think of your tactics. And once you chose your tactics, and therefore the channels through which you are implementing these campaigns, then you can choose your analytics and metrics, or a mix of them. There's no bullet, silver bullet, if you want, recipe and says, in order to do this, here's a straight recipe and that's how you're going to achieve it. Because social media is so varied and has so many options, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. So what would work for a client, it will not work for another. And that applies for metrics, that applies for platforms, that applies for strategies. So that's when it becomes, in a way, truly creative, because it gives you a chance to do whatever you want with it. Now, we'll speak a bit more about measurement. And I'm going to show you some excerpts of a report created by Altimeter. And Altimeter, or Altimeter, depends how you want to pronounce it. It's a US-based social media intelligence group. So these guys do research for clients for very big money in the US. And the reason why I like this piece of papers of theirs is because they make you think in layers. So an organization overall will have business objectives, and those business objectives will probably have some financial figures attached to them. But then part of those business objectives, you have metrics, right? You have sort of smaller objectives within those that are not necessarily financial. And then social media comes to support solely that base. So that's what this triangle that I show you shows. That you have financial performers, but then your business metric would be to reduce call center traffic. So if you do this through social media as an alternative channel, then you'd look at the inquiries solved outside your call center. Yeah, because then you're not paying money for the phone bills and electricity. It's just someone's computer. Now, what they also say when we speak about goals, which are a bit more general than objectives, is that these can be way more varied. So they can tell you that you can think of brand health, marketing optimization, sales, so revenue generation, operational efficiency, so this is very much making the company work better rather than anything else, customer experience and innovation. This is their view. If you go into your PR books, you'd see that another classification of goals is into knowledge, behavior, and task. So what we're saying is that if you want to raise awareness, then that's usually a knowledge goal. If you want to inform your public about options of, I don't know, healthy eating, then that's a knowledge goal. But for instance, if you want to change perceptions of youth about fatty foods, sorry, it's just around lunchtime here, then you're going into behavior because you want them to change something. So you want a before and after change. And then there are those goals related to tasks, which are very, very much, they're very close to objectives, and you want to do this by that because. So what these guys at Altimeter are saying is exactly what I've told you so far. So once you get your strategy, then you move into your metrics. Then you think in a way of how you implement this, and then you choose your technology. So I think half of our talk so far was that you need to leave your choice of technology, your choice of platform right at the end, not before. So when here it comes to you and say, please do a campaign for our course to publicize it to British students, please don't tell him, oh, we'll do a Facebook page, because we can. Go do your research, go find your target audience, go come up with, figure out what your strategy and tactics are, and then consider whether Facebook is the appropriate place. Because all in all, it might be that you just need to come up to Bournemouth and meet with students, So that's one of the things. Now, this is the slide that I like the most, because what they also offer are some formulas. And again, I tell you that there's no one-size-fits-all formula, But this is a good example to make you think of what you can measure out there. So for instance, we had the case of brand health. So we want to see what people are saying and how much are they saying about the company. So in this case, what you need is share of voice. Now, if you don't know what share of voice is, go look for definitions online. There are a couple of those, but the idea is a share of voice is a combination of sentiment and reach. So you see the formula tells you to take the brand mentions and then to divide that to a total of the competitive mentions on social channels. So basically, share of voice tries to find out how much, so what percentage of the entire talk about brands out there in your field online is dedicated to you, right? So if we were to say, I don't know, we choose Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and I don't know, American Cola. So you want to know on Twitter how many of the conversations are dedicated to Coca-Cola. So if it's 30% the share of voice of Coca-Cola, then you know 30% of the users speak about them. You don't know yet whether they're positive or negative. You just know how much and how often people would mention them. If you're looking into innovation, because we spoke, so I'll take you all the way to the bottom of that slide. You see that if you think of innovation, what they're saying as an example is that you could look into idea acceleration. So that means how quickly is it that we get ideas and how quickly they spread. So in this case, the formula that they suggest is to have the numbers of ideas on that topic at, let's say, the end of the month compared to the number of ideas for that same topic at the beginning. So, this is kind of the weight loss images where you say the before and after you've been through the diet. These measurements are good because they should make you think of the variety of things that you need to measure. And they should make you think all over again about how you formulate your objectives. The clearer you are, and it doesn't matter in which language you speak, whether it's French, Flemish, English, Japanese, or Urdu, the clearer you are in what you want to achieve, the easier it is to translate that into metrics. So when you think of tools, and this is kind of when we go towards the end of my talk, there are a lot of them. There are loads of things in terms of numbers that you can measure straight on a page. Think about a Twitter account. You can see how many tweets that account has sent to the internet up to date. You can see how many followers the account has, how many people follow them. You can see roughly, if you scroll through, on average, how many tweets per day is that account sending out. You can see whether their tweets have links in them or have hashtags or they speak to people or if they're only push messages. And this tells you quite a good story. There's a lot of data, obviously, that you can get on face value. It's the same thing that you do on Facebook. If you go into someone's page, you see how many likes they have, how many people are talking about them, because this is the new metric, right? Which is a combination of everything that has been shared, posted by the people about that sort of page. You can see how many posts that page puts on a day. But similarly, you can see how many likes, shares, and comments they receive. And if you pay attention, a very, very successful page will have a lot of likes because those are the least difficult to do because it's just a button. Then it would have a much smaller number of comments because they require some effort and they require your users to be engaged. And an even smaller number of shares, because that's the hardest thing. Once you decide to share something, there's an assumption of some level of endorsement and support of the message. So there's a funnel. Likes are not a metric, are more of a vanity metric, if you want, that you're looking on Facebook, but they're not really, really relevant. what matters, especially when you think of public relations, is the amount of comments and the nature of those comments and the amount of shares that you get. So how viral, it's virality, engaged users, and share of voice that you're and sentiment that you're looking into Facebook. Similarly, if you think of YouTube, there are loads of things that are reported on a page. So you can see how many views a video had, how many likes. You have the dislike button as well on YouTube. But there are also platforms that are associated with them. So you have YouTube Analytics, which give you an account that allows you to look more in depth into those sort of metrics. Again, they start to make sense once you have objectives to them, once you produce content with a reason. LinkedIn has group analytics. Facebook has its own Facebook Insights these days. Now, for measuring traffic, and we spoke about websites just because blogs are kind of at the edge between social media and the old web. Then there's Google Analytics and Google Insights for search. There are a lot of other things. I mean, what I've put there is the marketing grader from HubSpot, which includes a search engine optimization analysis. There's Twitter grader, and then there's tweet reach, and these sort of calculate the reach and the efficiency of a Twitter account. There's Cloud Peer Index and Pinproof. All these measure influence. Now, when it comes to influence, I highly recommend that you read carefully how influence is calculated, because sometimes influence is considered popularity, and popularity is translated as the number of likes, which is not enough. So, and similarly, influence on Facebook is different than influence on Twitter, and influence on Twitter is very different from an influence on a blog. So these are tools that you can use, but I'd caution you to think of what the results mean. Pinproof does influence on Pinterest. And then you're having Topsy, which I quite like, that allows you to compare volume of 3 topics online. So those can include hashtags, those can include websites at some point. So the point that I'm really trying to make is that in order for you to be successful online, you need to understand what social media is and what it stands for. You also need to know very, very well what you want out of it. And you can't get away in public relations working with social media without having a good grasp of measurement, without having a good grasp of analytics. So part of the beginner public relations consultant working with social media is to get used to the tools that are out there and get used to the vocabulary and the data that exists, and start to make sense out of them. So that's my message for you for today. What you also have at the end of this presentation are a couple of resources to which I will add some more in a message that I'll send to here. Any questions?
Questions? Now at the moment of online PR, the things we've seen. Thank you, Anna.
Thanks for the tweet. I've seen it.
Are you putting this up on your blog?
Yes, I will. So the Prezi will go up on the blog, but please be merciful. It might take a day or two, so you might see it at the weekend rather than today.
No problem. Great. No questions? Also not for pitch. Are you using these kind of things for your campaign for pitch that you say will advise our clients that we do our objectives like this and we will measure them like that? Your plan? Anyone?
Yes, you always
Yeah?
remember, like on Twitter, but if you are
Yeah, you'll use it in your campaign. And which of the things you used? What was it? Altogether? Feed reach? Things like that? Or?
yeah.
No questions at all?
very useful.
Yeah.
Well, said it not because you can use it with the users.
Yeah.
Just consider it's well, good for you to oh,
Yeah.
make just
Should always stay critical. Anna has given this talk, this topic, has talked about this topic for some years now, and it changes every year. It changes. That is interesting. What kind of assignment could we give the ones who are interested in getting a
Um,
higher grade?
I need to find it. It's up on my blog. What we've done with previous students is to ask them to do a social media audit. Now, social media audits are analyses of a company or individual and their activity online at a given moment in time. Social media audits are usually done in industry for two reasons. One is benchmarking. So you kind of want to compare yourself with your competitors and see where you stand. And the other one is business insight. So in many instances, when agencies want to hook a client, so they want to acquire a new client, they would do a social media audit, seeing the things that they do well and the things that they don't do so well online. And with this report, they would approach the client saying, well done here, but we could help you in these areas. So there are generally two ways of doing these, depending on, again, the objective that you have. So if it's a benchmarking, then you would already know what you would be looking at and you would be comparing yourself against your competitors. If it's business insight, it's a more of an exploratory process through which you want to see what people do and don't do. What I usually do with students like you guys, I recommend them to do a social media audit, an exploratory one, where they pick up a local business and they try to identify the objectives of that organization online, branding and usability. So what I do, let me see if I find the blog. Um, I give them, I tell them just to choose a company and then try to find out what they do online and come up with this report. So I'm going to look for that link and share it with you. What you would probably end up doing will be something like a 2 pages of writing or more, where you get an opportunity to report on some of the analytics that you see at page values, but also use some of the measurement tools. Let me find it. Let me find it.
But I was thinking the example that you gave of KLN, what you
Yeah.
could do, and you could even make a paper out of it, that you say, no, I'm not doing a 1 page or a 2 page addendum to my paper. What you could do is, well, let's benchmark Brussels Airlines, the airline of Belgium, to
Sure.
and to one in Germany, for example. Let's see what they do on Twitter, let's see what they do on Facebook, and so on, and integrate some of the measurement tools. And if you then
Yeah.
give me an analysis, but also a sort of not only analyze it, but also give a sort of communication advice. You see, well, Brussels Airlines, they could do this and this to improve that and that. That would be a great paper because you really
Yeah.
adopt these insights, and that is what
So
it
what
is.
I've
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. What I've sent you as a link in the chat is a blog post that I wrote some time ago, and it's called Social Media Exercises for PR and Branding. And you're having basically two options, two routes there, and some instructions. So something like Google the name of the company, see where you find them within Google. Go from there to where it takes you, whether it's their website, their Twitter page. Then try to find out the mission and vision of the company. Try to find out the target audience. Then from there, see if there are any social media links. And as you go with each and one of them, try to find out how they use it. So would the mission and vision transpire through that? How often do they tweet? How often do they answer to people? What do they tweet about? Also try to see whether the target audience that they have on social media is different from what you've seen on the website. and then try to think of whether they're effective and creative. That's basically what you need to keep in mind. Are they effective? Are they creative in what they do? So what I've done, I've shared with you that link, and there's another link that I'll share with you, which would take you through quite a number of resources, of templates, if you want, of social media audits that industry tends to use. Now, again, this is not a one-size-fits-all sort of thing, um, which is good because you're having loads of choice. So there's place for you to have your own voice. There you
Great.
go.
Any company is possible. If you say I really like a perfume company or whatever, you can do social media audit there internationally, benchmark it, whatever interests you. But then try and go into depth in your analysis, and you might come up with some great advice.
I'm very aware of time. I mean, I don't want to bore you all, but the both my website and the DCSBU blog that I shared with you have loads of resources and information related to measurement and digital media audits. So it might take a little bit more time for you to read and search the internet, but you do have pretty much everything that you would need to start a social media or a digital media audit, either for benchmarking purposes or just exploratory ones for companies.